Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how I cut and made this pencil skirt. You guys complained about my volume in the last video, so this video is a better one. So I really hope this video helps you guys. If it ends up being helpful, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video and share it to your friends. Bye guys. First of all, I have 1.5-inch allowance and this is going to be my zipper allowance. I'm just going to go ahead and label that. I'm going to label the top part of my pattern as my waist. The next thing to do is take my waist to hip, and I'll be using 9 inches here. Normally my waist to hip is 10.5, but I'm going to be adding a band, so that is why I'm using 9. So I'm just going to take this on both points on my paper like you can see. Then I'm going to use my ruler to connect the points. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to label that my hip area. Then I'm going to move over to the length of my skirt because I'm making a short skirt, more of like a mini skirt. So the length I'm going to be using here is 18.5. Remember that I'm still adding band, so it will still be a little longer than 18.5 when I'm done, but you get the gist. So I'm going to be measuring 18.5 on both sides of my paper as well, and I'm also going to connect the points. I'm labeling that my skirt length, and then the next thing is to add 2 inches allowance for folding in our skirt. I'm going to connect the points that we just made, and then I'm going to label it as my allowance. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to cut the excess that I can see, and I'm going to fold this allowance in. You don't have to do it, but I just like to do it. Let's move on to our horizontal measurement. So on my waist, I'm taking my waist divided by 4. 27 divided by 4 is 6.75, so I just marked it there. Then on my hip area, I'm using 40 inches, so 40 divided by 4 is 10, and I'm also going to mark it over there. Then I'm going to come to my skirt length area. I'm just going to deduct 1 inch from what we have done. Then I'm going to mark 9 inches. The next thing to do is just to use my ruler to connect my points. Once you are done connecting your points, if there is any sharp edge, then you want to slightly blend that out with a curve. You want curves on your skirt and not angles, so beware of that. Now we are adding our seam allowance, and I'm using 1.5. I'm just going to add 1.5 on the skirt length area, 1.5 on the hip area, and also 1.5 on the waist area. I'm going to go ahead and connect these new points. Then I'm going to label the space as my seam allowance. Because this is a dartless skirt, I'm going to come to the waist area and I'm going to add 1 inch here. Then I'm going to connect it to this hip point using my pattern master. On the 1.5-inch zip allowance, I'm going to mark 0.5 inch like you can see, and I'll connect that to the hip points on the fold that we have made earlier. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to cut. I'm going to grab my crepe material. I'm using 1 yard of this, then my zip, and I also have 1 yard of lining. Now let's ignore the color of my lining because it was so difficult to find the right match. So I'm going to fold my crepe into 2. Then I'll place my paper on it, and I'm going to open up all the folded area on my paper. Then I also used pins to hold the fabric to the paper just so that it doesn't shift. Then I'm going to cut out the exact shape that I have on my paper. I'm also going to cut out the exact shape on my lining. Remember, we're going to fold my lining into 2. Then I'm going to cut out the shape of my skirt. So now this is what I have. I'm going to come down to the bottom of my skirt. I'm going to take 1.5 inch on this side as well as on the other side of my skirt. I'm going to use my ruler to connect the points. Then I'm going to cut it out. Now I've done with the back and it's time to cut out the front. Now this fold that we have here, we're going to be cutting it out. So I'm just going to be using my scissors to cut it out straight. Also, that area that I labeled my zip board initially is going to go off. So I'm just going to cut that out. And I'm going to grab my crepe fabric and I'm going to place it on fold. This time around, I'm not cutting all the sides. I'm only cutting the side seam, the top part, and also the bottom part. I'm going to come to the midpoint of my front pattern that is on fold. Then I'm going to measure 1 inch down, and I'm going to connect it, like you can see, to any comfortable part on my waist area. Then I will cut. I also cut out my lining, and remember the same thing we did for the back. I'm going to take 1.5 on this side and 1.5 on the other side as well. Then we're going to connect using a ruler, and then we cut that out. Now it's time to sew our skirt. So I'm going to notch the midpoint on my lining, and I'm also going to notch the midpoint on my fabric. I will match the 2 notches, then I'm going to go ahead and sew on the base of the skirt. I'm also going to repeat the same step at the back. Notch the midpoint of the main fabric, notch the midpoint on my lining, then I'm going to sew straight. You can use a pin to join your pieces together before sewing. I'm done sewing, and this is what I have. I just did an under stitch by sewing the seam allowance that I just sewed, and I sewed it to my lining. And I'm going to turn my front piece to the wrong side, then I'm going to move my lining to the top part of the main fabric because I want them to align at the top. It doesn't necessarily need to align on the base. This step that I'm doing is completely optional, but if you're a beginner, then you want to use pins to secure your lining to your main fabric. So I just use pins to pin my lining to my crepe fabric, like you can see. Again, I did this on both sides of my project. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew with about 1/2 inch allowance on both sides of my project. I'm done sewing on both sides, and this is what I have. I'm just going to come over to the pointed edge of my skirt, and I'm going to cut it out like a small notch on both sides. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to flip it over, like I'm going to turn it over to the right side, and we're going to focus on those edges that we just cut. We're going to be using our scissors to be pushing them out because we want it to be nice and neat. Once we are done with that, we're going to head over to our ironing table, and we're going to iron. You guys, it is important to iron with a steam iron. That's going to make sure that you have a very nice and clean project. If you don't have a steam iron, then use some water and then iron. You'll see a huge difference in your project. Your project will be neat. We are done ironing, and this is what our back looks like, and this is also what our front looks like. Very nice, very beautiful. What I'm just going to do next is to use pins to secure my lining to my crepe, because crepes can be really unstable and I don't want anything to be moving when I am sewing. I'm going to place my 2 back pieces together, right side to right side, like you can see. Then I'm going to use pins to hold these parts that you can see together, because very soon we'll be joining these 2 parts and I don't want it to be shifting. Then I'm going to mark my allowance. Now remember that when we were drafting our pattern, our allowance was 1.5, but now I'm going to be using 1 inch because I've used 1/2 inch to sew it in. So I'm just going to take 1 inch on all sides of my zipper area. This is the part that we are using for our zipper area. I'm just going to take 1 inch from the top to the bottom of my skirt. Then I'm going to connect and draw a straight line. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew a straight stitch. Now for the parts that I want the zipper to end, I'm going to sew with loose stitches. Then for the other parts, I'm just going to sew with tight stitches. Again, open your seam allowance and make sure you iron it with steam iron or with water and dry iron. You can see what my project is looking like. Don't you just love it? I'm going to place the front piece and the back piece together, right side to right side. Then I also used pins to hold my lining to my main fabric. Then I'm going to shape it now. Now to shape it, I'm going to place my tape on my skirt. Then I'm going to measure 9, the same thing that we used for our waist to hip earlier. I'm going to measure this on both sides of my skirt, both on the lining and on the other side as well. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to take the entire length that we have at the back. Stretch your back piece when you are taking your measurements. Now what I have here is 21.5, so I'm just going to grab that 21.5 and I'm going to place it on my hip part on the front piece that we have. I'm still going to place it on that 9-inch mark. So this is what is going to ensure that our measurements are equal, then what I'm going for is 40, right? So I'm just going to slightly mark that 40 inches that I'm going for. Then I'm going to measure what is left. 3 inches is what is left, so I'm just going to divide 3 inches by 4, and whatever I get, I'm going to get 0.75. that will be my seam allowance on my hip area. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this on that point. Then also to do my waist, I'm going to take what I have on each side of the waistline like I did for the hip part as well. So I'm just going to take what I have here, then whatever is on that point of my tape, I'm going to place it on my front. Then what I'm going for is 27, right? I'm going to mark 27, and I'm going to mark the remaining allowance that is left. I'm going to get 5 inches. So if I divide 5 inches by 4, it is 1.25. So I already know that I'm taking 1.25 on my waistline. So I'm just going to do the same thing on the hemline of my skirt. The next thing to do is just to connect these points using a ruler. Now after you connect with a ruler, if you have any sharp edges, just make sure to draw curves instead of edges so that you don't have sharp edges when you are done. So the exact measurement that I have on that other side is what I'm going to duplicate on this other side. And once we're done, it is time to sew. And before we sew, we want to make sure that our sides align properly. Now don't worry if your back is bigger than your front. All you need to do is to ensure that your sides match properly. And I'm going to use pins to just secure this. I'm going to go over to the sewing machine to sew a straight stitch. I'm done sewing on both sides of my project, and this is what I have. So the next is to iron. Now what you want to do is to open your seam like this and make sure you iron on that point, and also turn it over to the right side and iron on the right side as well. So I'm done ironing, and this is what I have. The next thing is just to add our band to our skirt. I folded my band into 2, and in case you're wondering, the length of my band is 4.5 inches. Then I also ironed an interfacing on my band. So once you're done, you just fold this into 2 and iron properly so that you get that sharp edge that you can see on my band. So now what I just want to do is to notch the center part of my band and also notch the center part of my skirt. Then I'm going to match them together. I'm going to be using pins to attach my band to my skirt. I'm just going to do that around my waistline, and then once I'm done, I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew round. Remember that we are sewing only one edge, and for the other side I'm just going to grab my hemming gum and I'm going to just fold about 1/2 inch on the other side. Then I'm going to fold my hemming gum into 2. I'm going to place it like that, and I'm going to sew round on my band. I'm going to go head over to the sewing machine. I'm going to come back. Once I'm back, I want to fold the edges of my band together like you can see. I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and just finish it up there. Then I'm going to come back and notch the corner. Then I'm going to turn it to the right side. Once I'm done with this, what I have, I'm just going to tuck in my band properly and I'm going to iron. When I iron, the band is going to stay put, but I don't want to leave it like that. I'm going to still sew. The essence of sewing is so that my band is secure. And if you're wondering why we're still sewing after we have used hemming gum, it is so that we have that precision, so that especially if you're a beginner, you don't want your sewing to be moving all over the place. You just want it to be precise. That's why we are using hemming gum first. Now that we're done with the band, we just want to place the zipper parts together like this, and then we're going to take our waist measurement divided by 2. My waist is 27. If I divide by 2, that would be 13.5. So I'm just going to mark 13.5. Then I'm going to connect it to the previous points that we already made, and I'm going to sew with loose stitches. Then when I come back, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to place my zipper on it. That I'm going to sew off camera, and that is it, guys. That is all you need to do to sew your skirt. We have come to the end of the video. This is our finished project. I really hope this video was helpful. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed already. Also follow me on Instagram if you are not following me already. Thank you so much. I will see you all in my next one. Bye guys.